Returning now to the flood emergency that is continuing to grip parts of New South Wales. As we mentioned, that threat now on the mid-north coast. But joining us live is the Assistant Treasurer, Stephen Jones. Stephen, thanks for your time this morning. Short time ago, Susan Lee was on the program and she claimed that while some disaster payments are available, critical payments from Services Australia, such as $1,000 for an adult and $400 for a child, have not been activated. Is that true?
Yeah, look, I understand that Minister Watt's going to have something more to say about that this morning. We know that yesterday, of course, the emergency declarations were issued, including for my area here in the Illawarra and the Southern Highlands. The next step is signing the instruments which will have those emergency payments flowing. I'd expect that to happen imminently. And, of course, in a disaster like this, of course, we'll take any useful suggestions that are coming from the opposition or anyone else in this respect. But our number one priority has been dealing with the emergency phase, which is saving lives, saving properties and lives. And Minister Watt has been working closely with his New South Wales government counterpart. They're working very, very well to ensure that every effort goes into that priority. We'll then go into the next phase, which is around the cleanup. There will be Commonwealth assistance in respect of that. That is triggered by the emergency declaration and then, of course, the build back after that. So look, we're moving quickly. We're responding as fast as we can. And we want to ensure that when houses are still going underwater, when people are still being evacuated from their homes and their properties, that we give priority to that.
Right, OK. So as for those disaster payments, it's a matter of due course. You expect that to happen anytime soon?
I expect sometime today, mate, that
right.
We'll be making announcements about that. First step is signing the declaration. The second step is the specific instruments for those disaster payments.
As you know, Stephen, this is the third or the fourth time that these areas have been flooded in just the past 18 months to 24 months. As a longer-term option here, I notice a few more people are starting to talk about this now. Do you believe that people should be paid to relocate, to move to safer areas so they don't put their lives at risk and so the government doesn't have to keep bailing them out?
Look, I think everything's got to be on the table. We've got to look at the building back and the resilience to ensure that our infrastructure is up to scratch. That includes the water management infrastructure. We've also got to ensure that we've got planning and appropriate planning in place, whether it's the right sort of buildings being built in the right sort of places, or whether it's saying that there are some areas where we just know that these are flood zones and we shouldn't have dwellings there, we shouldn't have businesses in the flood path, or we shouldn't have inappropriate sorts of businesses. A lot of the areas we're talking about, and I'm quite familiar with them. I was talking to Susan Templeman, who's doing a great job up there in the Hawkesbury on behalf of her constituents. A lot of these areas are rural areas. That doesn't mean there's not damage, but it means there's not as much damage to property. But a hell of a lot of suburbs, hell of a lot of homes being damaged as well and been wiped out as well. And we do have to have a hard think about how we do the rebuild in these areas.
Yep, and as the Treasurer pointed out yesterday, this flooding, it only leads to more inflationary pressures because you've got issues with agriculture at the moment. It's affecting the prices at the supermarket on top of everything else that we are seeing at the moment when it comes to price rises. On the economy, though, what do you expect the cash rate to be by this year's end?
Look, we'd expect the Reserve Bank Board to issue at least one more rate rise this year, similar to the last. I think the important point to make here is that this is not a step that's being taken with the objective of inflicting pains on households. The real beast we've got to fight here is inflation, because we know that nothing is going to hurt households more and businesses more is if the price of everything is galloping away, and instead of inflation with a 5 or a 6 in front of it, we see inflation with a 10 or a 12 in front of it, as we're seeing in some countries overseas. So that's the objective, to take some of the heat out of the economy. There will be some short-term pain in this. We know that. We feel very, very much the pain of Australian households and businesses. But the alternative is not doing nothing. The alternative is seeing inflation going through the roof And that's going to be far more painful for Australian households and businesses.
So when economists are forecasting there may well be another 0.5% rise next month, that might be accurate in your view?
Look, we anticipate there'll be another rise in the winds when the Reserve Bank meets again next month. I hope I am wrong. I'm hoping that we see, something in the order of that. I mean, I'm not going to do the Reserve Bank governors and the board's job for them. That's their job, with all the information available to them to set monetary policy. But all I'm saying is I won't be surprised. The objective here is we've got to bring inflation down. The price of everything going through the roof will do far more damage over the long term if we are unable to turn that around. We've got a short window before we can bring this around, bring the inflation beast down before it starts spiralling out of control. And that is not a future we can contemplate. So short-term pain, but for a real objective.
How much, just a final one here, how much is this changing or affecting your budget, your budget's planning? It seems that new figures change every week.
Look, it's creating a lot of uncertainty, a lot of turmoil, but we're elected to govern. We're elected to deal with the circumstances that we face. So we'll at least have monetary policy and fiscal policy running in the same direction here. We don't want to see the Commonwealth Government, through its own budget decisions, further stoking inflation by the sort of wild and uncapped spending that we saw in the last days of the last government. So it'll be responsible budget, trying to rein in spending and rein in the budget deficit, while keeping true to the promises that we made before the last election, some of which will provide some household relief, whether it's the promises that we made in relation to aged care or the promises that we made in relation to childcare. We'll keep those promises and they'll be reflected in this and the next budget. But we can't be, and the message we've got to send to Australians is this is not going to be a Scott Morrison budget where we are just throwing money around like confetti at a wedding. We cannot afford to do that. That will just stoke the fires of inflation, and Australians deserve better from their government and their economic management.
Okay, that's the Assistant Treasurer, Stephen Jones, speaking to us live this morning. Stephen, thank you. We'll talk to you again soon.